So, what you're trying to say is that you fell here from another world? But when you wanted to leave and go on to the next world, your path was blocked by some unknown god?
Outlanders, your journey ends here.
We should head off. Let's get going!
Hey folks, how's it going? Genshin Impact has been released a few days ago following some fairly intense hype behind it. The game looked quite interesting, and being a Zelda-esque exploration game, I've decided to avoid informations and spoilers to instead experience the game by myself. The reason why the first impressions on it are coming a bit late is because quite a few features are locked behind your progression, features such as co-op, character ascension and the battle pass. I also wanted to take some time to figure out how the grinding cycle worked for upgrades and whatnot. So it took me a couple of days to get to adventure rank 25, and I think this might be a good spot to write down my thoughts on the game. First thing first, you don't need me to tell you how pretty it looks. Despite being sort of a generic anime art style, everything is clean and crisp and colorful, and the open world nature of the game often leads to some great panoramic shots. Accompanied by a calm and relaxing orchestral soundtrack, I've found myself stopping to simply stare at the vistas from time to time. The game also only released with 2 out of 7 regions, so I guess we've got a lot more running around to enjoy. As for the voice acting, I've heard some complaints, but personally I don't find the English dub to be that atrocious. Paimon is just as easily hateable in Japanese. My main focus for swapping though was that the main character shares her voice actress with Anila,
果たしてそれから何年経ったのか私にはもうわからない
Beidou with Zoe,
おはよう。そろそろ出発しようと思うんだが、一緒にどうだ？
Lisa with Rosetta,
任務は終わりっこないわそれよりもお姉さんとおしゃべりしましょう
and there's also Io, Chichi,
ふぼくろへようこそ。ナナだ。
Saria, Zhangling,
ちょうどいいところに来た一緒に食材を補充しに行かない
Folia and Ranko Kazaki, Fischl,
運命のささやきが聞こえる私の名を呼んでいるわ
and many more, so I feel quite at home already.
警察騎士アンバー
Onto the gameplay, the combat itself is quite simple. Every character gets a basic combo on the attack button that can also be held down to perform a charge attack or a dive attack if you're at a certain height. The second button lets you dodge, and then there's 2 skills to use. The first only recharging via cooldown, the other require you to deal elemental damage or kill enemies to charge up energy. Archers also get a dedicated aiming button, but that does the same thing as their charge attack. And here comes my first gripe with the game. You can't customize the hotkeys from within it. Personally, I find it a bit uncomfortable to have to use Q and E for skills and F to interact. The problem grows even more when trying to use a controller, since it defaults to the JP configuration that swaps the accept and cancel buttons. Hopefully hotkey customization will be implemented sooner rather than later. Another little issue with the controls is the camera, which has a higher sensitivity for side-to-side movements than it has for vertical ones. This is also true for the aiming mode, and it tends to get in the way both when exploring and when fighting tall enemies. I think this was made because of the mobile platform, so you don't accidentally end up looking at the sky while fighting, but I would like to see an option to fix that on PC. Also, to remove the automatic camera adjustment when fighting. Again, it makes sense for mobile, but when playing on PC I would like to have full control over my camera. Back to the combat though, as simple as it is, things start clicking the moment you add character swaps and elemental interactions into the mix. Your party is composed of 4 characters that can be swapped in and out on a very short cooldown. Each of them will be aligned with one of the 7 elements currently in the game, and by performing an elemental attack, they're going to inflict the enemies with the attack respective status. Once this status is up, an attack of a different element will cause a reaction, and there's quite a few, ranging from debuffs to more damage. Putting an enemy on fire, for example, will make it suffer a small damage over time effect, but a burning target can be hit with water to inflict Vaporize for more damage but dispelling the initial debuff, it can be hit with Lightning to inflict Overload for more AoE pyro damage, it can be hit with Earth to create a small pickup shield, or Wind to deal extra elemental damage and spread the burning effect to the ground and other enemies. One of the more powerful reactions at the moment seems to be Superconduct, generated by mixing Frost and Lightning. Not only does this inflict AoE cryo damage, it also reduces the target defense for subsequent normal attacks. As far as elemental resistances go, there doesn't seem to be an elemental wheel of sorts. Instead, elemental enemies will simply be immune to incoming damage of the same element. This entire system, alongside the standard attacks and the requirement for dodging to gain iframes and avoid damage, makes the combat pretty satisfying, despite being a two-buttons thing. Now, progression. Everything in the game seems to have some sort of levels, usually capped until you get enough materials to unlock them. First is your account. It has adventurer ranks that you level up by completing missions, opening treasure chests, and generally just simply playing the game. Your AR determines which main story quests you can advance on and which features you have access to. Co-op, for example, gets unlocked at AR-16, while AR-20 will grant you access to the Spiral Abyss and the Battle Pass, which also unlocks daily missions. At Adventurer rank 25 is when you'll be able to increase your world level. The entire world has a leveling system of its own, and as it progresses, the monsters in it increase in level and start dropping high rarity loot. The same goes for the chests, so it might be advisable to save high rarity chests until your world level is at least 4, at Adventurer rank 35+, so they might start dropping higher rarity accessories. Characters have their usual levels capped at 20, and they have to go through an ascension to increase their level cap. Usually it just means collecting some mats. Other than the possibility of reaching higher levels, ascending a character also unlocks more skills and passives, as well as the possibility to level up a character's individual skills to have slightly better effects. Characters also have more passive abilities locked behind their constellation, but unlocking these requires you to pull a duplicate of that character from the gacha, or buy it from Paimon's shop. MC is the only exception here, having the constellation materials being awarded to you as quest rewards or being available in city shops. Much like characters, weapons have the same standard levels and ascension locks, but instead of constellations they get a refining feature that eats up a duplicate copy of the weapon to grant it a better passive effect. Since 3-star weapons are really easy to come by, while 4-star weapons require quite a bit of mass to craft and refine, it's not unusual to see 3-star weapons outperforming 4-star ones in the early game. Another little gripe with all these levels is the fact that monsters give little to experience. At level 40, for example, it takes 43,000 experience to get to level 41, and monsters still only give about 10 to 15 experience each. On the bright side at least, the materials required to ascend and level up characters and weapons are fairly common. Up until Ascension level 2, I didn't have to go back to farm for anything, as all the materials I needed have been dropped from random monsters and common chests. I am however spreading myself a bit thin since I want to level up both the free-to-play characters for future challenges, as well as a few of the gacha ones I've got because they look quite fun. Ascension level 2, Weapon Ascension level 2 and leveling up is starting to bite fairly deep into my goal though. If you can manage to make a single team and focus on 1 or 2 damage dealing characters, you can then keep 2 supports back only to swap in to use skills and save a lot of resources while still having quite an easy time. Gear-wise, the weapons stand on their own, but artifacts actually come in sets. Most of them have 2 set and 4 set effects, but I also run into some one-off artifacts that can be used to fill the gap. Weapons all come with a basic attack stat, a main stat boost and a skill that can be refined. The main stat boost can range from basic attack, HP or defense, but it can also have a bit more interesting stats such as physical damage bonus, crit rate or damage, elemental mastery or energy recharge, so you're going to be able to pick and choose which stat you'll want on a character based on the role it has to play in the team. Main physical DPS, attack, crit rate or crit damage and physical damage bonus are going to be your best bets. Main elemental DPS, elemental mastery boosts the damage of your elemental reactions. Support, energy recharge is going to allow your characters to cast a lot more skills. Healers and tanks get HP and defense, but the only characters to have skills that scale off of those stats for now are Barbara and Noelle. On the other hand, there are 5 artifact slots. The first one for flowers, which will always have a flat HP, the second one for plumes, which will always have flat attack, and the other 3, which are sands, goblets and circlets, will instead have a random main stat. All the accessories will have random substats as well, so trying to optimize a gear build is going to be a bit of a hellish journey. In the early game, 3-star artifacts are extremely common at least, and you'll also be given some 4-star ones. I don't think there's going to be a big need to work on artifact sets and upgrades for them, at least not until we can get a lot of 4-star ones. For now, I'm just equipping whichever 3-star artifacts comes with a main attack stat and at least one more offensive oriented substat. I'm also not upgrading them past +4, which is when they'll get an extra substat. For the stats instead, I'm particularly liking Berserker for its increased crit rate, Exile for its energy recharge, and Sojourner for the boost to charge attacks. Picking and choosing which artifacts to upgrade later on is going to be a bit of a challenge and will probably require a video all of its own. For now, let's move on to the elephant in the room, gacha and monetization. The gacha actually looks really bad when you see the abysmal drop rates. A 5-star character can only be pulled on a 0.6% chance, while a 4-star character will have a draw rate of 5.1%. This means that you have a 94.3% chance to pull a 3-star weapon every time you roll. What offsets this a little bit is the PT system they've put in place. Every 10 pulls you're guaranteed a 4-star or higher, but let's be real here, a 4-star character or weapon, and every 90 pulls you're guaranteed a 5-star. The guaranteed drops don't mean that you're going to get the character that is on the rate up banner though, as that character only has a 50% chance of appearing. It will however be a guaranteed drop should you hit the 90 draws PD twice. That's 180 draws, with each 10 draw costing about $30. This is going to sound weird, but $540 to guarantee that you get the character you want is still less expensive than a lot of other gachas out there. Not really excusable, just less expensive. I'm not really taking into consideration the 4-star characters, since despite not being guaranteed pulls, we're still bound to get a ton of them. A 10 draw guarantees a 4-star drop, and if it's not one of the banner characters, the second 10 pull will make sure you get one. Rolling will also give you either Stardust for 3-star weapons pull or Star Glitter for 4-star and 5-star pulls, which you can spend in Paimon's shop. This Star Glitter can be used to buy 4-star characters, weapons and materials, or reinvested into more rolls. These are fairly rare though, so I would suggest saving them up for a new 4-star character or character duplicates to level up their constellations. The Stardust instead will fall aplenty, and we've got some special banners and normal banner pools that we can buy with it. The dual currency to spend on rolls got me a bit confused at first, but I'm actually glad it's there. They both cost the same in terms of Primogems and real money, but the Intertwined Fate is exclusive to rotating banners that have characters on rate up, while the Acquainted Fate can be used on the starting discounted banner, the weapon banner, and the standard permanent banner. I'm glad it's there because of how the PT works. Reaching the guaranteed 5-star drop on a rotating banner will require 90 draws, 180 if you miss the 50-50. This first rotating banner lasts for 20 days, after which it'll be gone, and with it any accumulated PT rolls you've gotten. If you stopped at 80 draws with no 5-star character, you will have to start from 0 on the next rotation. This is thankfully not the case for the standard banner. Being permanent at all, you'll be free to spend your rolls there and you will eventually hit the PT mark that will spit out a 5-star. For the rest of the monetization, we've got a monthly card coming in with 300 Genesis Crystals, which convert 1-to-1 to Primogems, and 2,700 Primogems across a 30-day span, costing 5.49 euros. An entire set of varying prices for Primogems, for which the first purchase will double the amount of gems that you get, and lastly the Battle Pass. These are the current prices in euros, the monthly card bringing hands down the most Primogems for the lowest price, 10 times cheaper than buying a standard 32 euros pack. For the second cheapest option, it's a tie between the first purchase of the 32 euros pack and the Battle Pass. What's a bit weird to see is the price per gem go higher from the 32 euros pack to the 55 and the 110 euros. But I guess if you're willing that hard, you won't care about the 0.0001 increase. For light spenders instead, the monthly card brings a lot of value, and the Battle Pass comes with a lot more than just Primogems. Let's go take a look. The Battle Pass appears to last for 40 days, during which you'll have to complete missions to unlock more levels. The free-to-play crew is going to get some fairly basic rewards when it comes to level up materials for characters and weapons, gold and standard draw currency. Upgrading the Battle Pass is going to multiply those rewards by 4, and the item in it that's the most alluring isn't even the gacha currency, it's the gold, or Mora as they call it. My characters are currently at level 40, facing the second ascension and the journey to level 50. The ascension alone costs 40k mora, and leveling them up is going to set me back almost 200k more. Other than a few quests, the highest mora income comes from spending stamina to farm ley line nodes. The stamina has a cap of 120 and regenerates at a rate of 1 every 8 minutes. The ley line nodes in world level 3 also only drop 36k mora each while costing 20 stamina to open. If I were to only spend my stamina on gold ley lines, I would be able to get almost 216k mora every 18 hours, but this means skipping out on weapon ascension materials and character skill books, so the gold rewards alone make the battle pass that much more appealing. Despite the bad impressions from the raids, I don't think there's anything too outrageous in here. For the moment I'm planning to stay free to play though, see how the game goes and maybe consider the battle pass once I reach its level 30 for one of the new weapons. I'm currently enjoying the game quite a lot, even if I'm starting to notice some issues with the stamina keeping your progressions back a bit, but that's par for the course for mobile games. The part that actually scares me is farming for artifacts and upgrading them. There's quite a few sets out there, and dungeons have 3 different sets in their loot table, so when looking for a piece of gear you will be rolling for a 1 in 3 sets, a 1 in 5 piece, and other than the first 2 slots, you will also have to get lucky in getting the main stat roll you're looking for, as well as getting a couple of decent substats. I don't know much about upgrading yet, but I've seen the same substat on different +0 items at different values, so I'm going to guess there's variety in there too. For now, we're just playing with random 3-star and a few 4-star artifacts, but the day will come when we'll be hunting for a 5-star artifact from a specific set, with an attack or elemental mastery main stat, and at least 2 offensive substats that didn't just get a minimum roll, and we'll be praying for the extra stat boosts to go into those when upgrading it. People who thought 0.6% 5-star rates in the gacha were the worst part of the game are about to be in for a rude awakening. Still, I guess we'll cross that hell when we'll get there. For now, I've got to admit that the journey has been a real joy. I'm especially fond of the game's music and a few characters, and I'm actually finding it difficult to put down, which is another reason why this video is coming out so late. For the moment, that's all from me. If you've been playing it already, feel free to share what you're enjoying the most down in the comments. If not, I would suggest that you give it a try. As always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you around soon. Ciao!